Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the fifth week of the NESA online training. I'm going to be covering field sanitation, actions when lost, and attraction techniques. The presentation will be broken into two sections. I will first go over field sanitation. Feel free to, as I'm going through the presentation, to take advantage of the Q&A feature of the Teams broadcast and ask our moderators any questions that you need to in support of this, and if they can't answer it, I will try to get it in a break. So without further ado, okay. Field hygiene and sanitation. So I'm going to go over the techniques for living in the field to keep your body and the environment clean and healthy. This will cover campsite living, what to do with your waste, sanitation, personal hygiene, and environmental protection. First up is human waste. If you're setting up a base camp for any sort of duration, it's best to see if portable toilets can be brought in. And this is typically what you'll see when if it's in a Civil Air Patrol context, we typically make arrangements to either stop and use facilities or bring in capabilities. At NESA, you'll find a number of portable toilets in the field that can be used. If you're in more remote areas, or while you're traveling on sorties or in remote areas, you can use other methods I'll go over: cat hole latrines, trench latrines, bucket latrines, and other alternatives. I can tell you that typically in a CAP context, again, I've had to use cat hole latrines maybe a handful of times, and very rarely run into the others. I haven't run into the others in CAP. So the first method, cat hole latrines, you need to be at least 200 feet from any water source, and that goes for any of the waste cases. You need to be away from your water sources, away from your camp. 200 feet is a good number. Think at least about 60 or 70 paces away. You're going to want to dig a hole that's 6 to 8 inches deep and 12 inches wide. I'll be honest, having done a lot of backcountry camping, a lot of long distance camping where the predominant tool that I use is a cat hole latrine, that's a very large cat hole latrine. The depth is important. As you get more able and capable, you will not need the width. I'll just leave it at that. Use organic soil with speed decomposition. This includes also getting in the sunward facing. So if you have a choice of being on the sunward side of a tree or on the shaded side of a tree, use the sunward side, and then backfill the dirt when completed. Cover the area with pine needles and twigs. Try to make it not too obvious, and use a trowel or shovel. Your trowel or shovel should not touch human waste. I will add one to this, having done this a lot, is if you find a place that is private and conducive to you doing your business, it most likely is someplace that somebody else will find conducive to doing their business. It's good to put a stick or something there to mark that that's not a place that people should dig. Cat hole latrines continued. It's best if you're So if you have a choice, get biodegradable toilet paper. It could be marked as septic safe, anything that will break down. And you can look for alternatives to toilet paper if you need to. One alternative that I tend to use, you can get moist wipes or baby wipes. This is one that I use. Just make sure that they can be decomposed or are septic safe. Many of these, if they're marketed as baby wipes, are actually not biodegradable. So if you're going to bury it in the hole, it needs to be biodegradable. So backpacking trowels are lightweight and can easily be carried. And they're much smaller and lighter than entrenching tools. Entrenching tools are typically about 3.5 pounds. You can get these orange backpacking trowels at Walmart. or any other backpacking site. They usually weigh about 2 ounces and can be bought for $2. The one you see pictured in the upper right is an even lighter option. This is what's called a deuce of spades. It's about $15, but it weighs less than an ounce. This is what I typically use. Or you can get the You Dig It trowel down here in the bottom. It weighs about 6.5 ounces and can be bought for about $20. So that's about the same cost as this, and this is aluminum. So to give you an idea, I can carry 100 of these for the same weight as a entrenching trowel. You can carry about almost 30 of those little black plastic trowels for an entrenching tool. So really try to stick away from the entrenching tools if you can. So other latrines that you might run into, a trench latrine, they're for larger groups, long-term usage. Like I said, you typically won't see these. You have dirt for backfilling, and toilet paper can be put on a stick and covered with a can to keep it dry. Again, the big takeaway is keep 200 feet away from your campsite or your water source. And this could be anybody's water source, so stay away from streams, lakes, anything of that nature. Pail latrines are pretty self-explanatory. Waste can be removed when you're done. 5-gallon buckets can be used and save the lid to cover, and buckets can be used without a lid, with a lid without building covering. A couple others you might run into. There's burnout latrines, basically a seat. You can use it, and they have depicted here a hand washing station where you can pour in water and clean your hands afterwards. So a couple other latrines continued, disposal john, drop box toilets, anything where you keep it in a bag. I think this next one has, oh, they don't have this one. So if you have a latrine area that you've established, mark the latrine area with flagging tape to make sure that it's well marked. You can use light sticks at night to make sure people don't wander into it by accident. And ponchos or other material can be used to provide some privacy. If you have a tarp, you can also use a tarp, tie up a tarp for privacy. And then try to keep latrines downwind from a camp area. Again, 200 feet or 70 paces from camp. So alternatives for a base camp, the portable toilet kit with a snap-on lid for about $25. This actually works pretty well. This is what we personally use for our storm shelter options. The inflated potty, never used it, but same kind of technique. You can carry it with you and carry a bag. And then there's cassette toilets and the larger Coleman portable toilets. These are typically associated with RVs or schoolies where you need a toilet in it, or you can just have a bag for sanitary disposal of things for about $3. So no matter what method you use, hand washing is a very important thing to do afterwards. You want to, again, keep 200 feet away from streams and other water areas. This is to minimize any contamination of the local water supply with what you're going to be using as soap or contaminating your potential water sources. Use biodegradable soap if possible. You can either use the soap leaves, or you can use camp suds is a good option. It's highly concentrated. You can carry a lot with it, and it's absolutely biodegradable. Consider using sanitizing toilets, towelettes and wipes. Again, the moist towelettes are good. Make sure they're biodegradable. If they aren't biodegradable, you're going to have to pack them out. And then clean your hands after toilet use and before eating and preparing food. If you don't have the ability to wash and you have hand sanitizer, that's a good option, but washing is your primary means of getting your hands clean. Wastewater. Make sure that it can be run off where it won't be trapped and create mud. Wash water from cooking and eating should have all your food particles removed and dispersed before to avoid attracting animals. Animals will go for your garbage. If you leave food particles in it, that will encourage them to go for your garbage. They have good smelling or good ability to smell, and when they start getting into your gear or into your trash, they will tend to get into other things that you own. One thing that you can do is you can be essentially a human sump, and when you eat your meal, if you're eating out of an MRE, if you're eating out of like a Mountain House dehydrated meal, make sure that you clean that bag out. Absolutely. Lick it clean. Do everything you can to avoid having any food particles that could impact your cleanliness. Because you want to take these. I'll typically, if I have a dehydrated meal, I'll eat it. I'll essentially clean it, lick it clean, and then I'll fold it up into a small packet and put it into a Ziploc bag. That keeps the odors down, keeps the garbage down, and I can easily carry it. Small pans of water can be dumped in a secluded spot or thrown or dispersed away from camp. So if you are going to wash your gear and you're going to dump it out with some food particles, make sure that you get it away from your camp, especially away from any place that you're sleeping or any place that you're going to keep gear to avoid critters. Trash. Camp cleanliness is important. It's important to keep the trash cleaned up. It's also very important that you keep your camp organized. You want to make sure that when it's time to move, you can find all your gear and you're ready to go. You also want to be able to do it in the night. Your pack should be set up so that you can get into it without a light. And your tent, when I sleep, everything's organized so that I can know where everything's in my tent without a light. So keeping everything clean and orderly is important. Your trash, you need to, essentially, if you packed it in, you need to pack it out. You want to avoid attracting insects, so you don't want to get stuff on your pack. You don't want to get stuff on your clothes. If you get stuff on your pack or your clothes, you will attract insects, you will attract animals. And then pack out what you pack in. So I very rarely burn anything in a campfire. In fact, you probably will rarely have a campfire in Civil Air Patrol. They tend to, if you're doing an open fire big enough to burn your garbage, you just typically don't run into that. So take Ziploc bags, take the big gallon Ziploc bags, dedicate 1 or 2 of them for garbage, and then you can carry them out that way. You can also carry the black bags, but they don't seal up as well. The Ziploc bags are great because you can seal them and put them in your bag without worry about them leaking or getting things in your bag. And if you're really worried, you can double pack the Ziploc bags. As I said, try not to burn your stuff. Don't bury your trash. Absolutely don't bury your trash. Animals will dig it back up. And don't dump your trash or wastewater into a latrine hole. It should be dedicated for the purpose that they're intended for. So each member should collect and carry out their own trash. Your fellow teammates are not your trash collection service. Do not keep trash or food packs where small animals will be attracted. So you just, again, they'll destroy your equipment getting into it. Typically, where we run into problems are raccoons. Raccoons are notorious for getting into your gear if you leave food in them, especially if there's food, scent available. That's a reason why I do not carry food into my tent. I do not eat in my tent. I do not carry food into my tent because they will tend to want to get into that. You may be out doing work, and when you come back, you'll have stuff destroyed because of a raccoon. Rodents are also a problem. I've never really had a problem with a rodent in backcountry, where I tend to have rodent problems if you're near any sort of lean-to or where humans do traffic a lot. There's more chance that you'll get rodents. They love salt. They'll eat at your packs. And basically, don't leave your pack out leaning against a tree or unprotected. I typically leave my pack immediately outside my shelter because I don't want to have the scents associated with that inside my shelter, but it's immediately next to my shelter so that I can deal with any animals that are getting into it. Again, straps often absorb sweat and salt, and the rodents will like to chew on that. So, bears. If you happen to live in bear country, make sure you check your local procedures and warnings. You may have something very specific. They may have, if you're going into an area that has bears, check with the local ranger. They may have special instructions. Sometimes there is enhanced bear activity that you have to deal with, and they'll provide recommendations of how to deal with that. In general, keep your food and trash at least 50 feet away from your campsite for storage, and hang in a tree at least 10 feet high from the ground, 3 feet from the branch it is hanging, and 4 feet from the tree trunk. I think these are a little short, actually. Definitely the one from the tree trunk, because the bears are very agile and will get 4 feet out. They have been known to break into cars and open food boxes. So one of the things you can look at is trying to keep a Bermuda triangle. This is where you keep all your kitchen areas, your cooking, your washing, and any trash that you generate should be generated in a kitchen cooking area that is 50 to 100 feet away from your sleeping area that's downwind. You keep your gear up in a tree. You want it 6 feet down off the limb, 12 feet high, and at least 6 to 8 feet away from the actual trunk so that the bear can't get it. And then you do your sleeping area away from anywhere that you've prepped food. That'll keep the odors, minimize the odors that you are exposed to, and then you'll have the less likely chance of attracting a bear. So even in non-bear country, food needs to be secured and keep it safe from other animals and pests. I have seen an entire Cub Scout pack lose almost all of their food overnight due to raccoons. Do not leave a food setting about the campsite. They'll just attract animals, and if you're there multiple nights, they'll come back. Keep your food, like as I was saying, don't keep your food in your tent or shelter unless you want to wake up with a new roommate. And in non-bear country, you can still hang it in a tree. So even though in Alabama, we don't have to worry about bears, I do have to worry about raccoons. I will hang my gear still, or my food. And I'll hang it very similar to a bear hang, just to keep them from eating my food. So base camps. In base camps, try to arrange for trash dumpsters or regular pickup. This is what you'll see. You'll have vans coming around. They'll pick up your garbage. There'll be a single point of collection for garbage. If you don't have that single point, again, collect it on your own and keep track of your own garbage. If not, try to keep the trash bag and then tie trash bags up in the tree. Double bag if the garbage is spilled out on the outside of the bag. So if you have anything that's leaking on the outside of the bag, make sure to double bag it. And then hang your stuff if you're in bear country and keep it 50 feet away from your camp area to avoid bear engagements. So base camps, you may need to have water brought in for washing and resupply. Typically we'll have water cans, or we'll just have igloo water coolers, 5-gallon water coolers. They'll be available in the back of the van. That's usually sufficient. If we're running a mission, we're very timely on making sure that those water containers are full and that people's own water containers are full. You may run into buffaloes or larger water trailers if there's one location where a lot of people are drawing water from. So if you run into a situation where you have canvas bags, be careful. They can get mold and mildew and bacteria. Just be aware of that. Typically, like I said, you'll run into the water coolers, and if you're filling a water buffalo, inspect the tank for cleanliness, and if you need to, do an inspection kit on it to make sure. So personal care, to make sure your hygiene is kept up. Wash your face and hands and your armpits at least each day. If water is limited, use cornstarch and rub briskly with a dry towel. Really, again, this is another time I'll do a plug for, wipes. They're absolutely perfect. Some of the companies make wipes that are dedicated. They're more like small towels, and you can actually get your whole body with that. Highly recommend that. Your teeth should be cleaned daily. If you don't have a toothbrush, you can use something to get in there and clean it out, cloth on your finger. If you know you're only going to be out for a couple days, if there's any dentists in the crowd, I'm sorry, but you can get by with just the toothbrush portion of it. That also minimizes your smellables. So I will typically carry a toothbrush. I won't always carry toothpaste with me, just because I'm trying to avoid that smellable aspect of it. Underwear should be changed at least twice a week. It's debatable. If no water to wash, shake it out and air for at least 2 hours. So this is where I'll make a plug for two things related to underwear. First off is avoid cotton. If you wear cotton briefs, avoid them. If you sweat, that's going to cause a lot of problems. If you have to wash them, they're extremely hard to get dried out in a timely manner. Use a synthetic underwear. I would also recommend that if you have any friction issues, 2 things you can do about that. First thing you can do about it is a number of companies make boxer briefs for both men and women that provide 7 to 9 inches of compression down your leg. That will help with friction and chafing, and they are synthetic. So my typical gear, I will bring 2 pairs. I will wear one. I will take it out. I will actually wash it, let it dry overnight, wear the other pair clean, and just continuously rotate on that. If you can't do that, then follow the instructions here that you should change it at least twice a week and air it out when you can. The other thing I'll put a plug for in terms of keeping things, keeping hygiene and keeping moving is one of the best tools that you can have is Gold Bond. I think we've brought this up before. Liberal application of Gold Bond will get you through a lot of issues. They do make smaller containers. They make an even smaller travel container that you can get. This is good for your feet, and it's good for everything else where you sweat. So highly recommend it. You can get the smaller containers once and then continuously refill them off the big containers. That's the most cost-effective way of doing that. So wash your feet daily, keep the socks clean and dry. If you can, keep a dry pair of socks with you as you're walking and as you're hiking through the woods. If your socks get wet and you have a chance to break, pull them off, put on a dry pair, hang the wet pair on the back of your pack so they can dry out. Avoid wearing any scented deodorants. They will attract insects, perfume, aftershave, and don't launder in streams or ponds with any soaps. Carry at least, if you're going to wash, fill the water at your water source, walk 200 feet or so away from the water source, and then go ahead and go do the washing. Pictured here is the camp suds that I mentioned previously. So some alternatives. These are the disposable washcloths that are pre-moistened. You can use those for cleaning. Solar showers are an option. Tend to take a while to get warm, and you're typically not going to get a setting up the privacy to take a shower is difficult. And then disposable tooth cleaners. Again, I would just bring a toothbrush. It's by far the easiest and lightest. If you really want to save weight, you can cut the toothbrush handle in half and save a couple grams. Eating and cooking. So as we stated before, wash your hands before you're eating and preparing your food. Whether you're just out walking or whether you've gone to the bathroom recently. Make sure your cooking utensils and food utensils are clean. If you're boiling water, if you're going to do a dehydrated meal, take your utensils and just dip them in the boiling water, and that's a good way to give them a quick sanitization. You don't have to worry about it. You can wash them with biodegradable soap and then rinse well, and then use boiling water to rinse. I would say that if you just have them and drop them in the boiling water for a couple minutes, that will do the same. Cooking pots or pans with nonstick surfaces makes cleaning easier with far less water. Really, you should be endeavoring to, if you are going to use cooking in the field, I highly encourage you to do 1 of 2 things. 1, you learn to enjoy your food cold. I will typically eat my MREs in the field cold because it is field expedient to keep going. And I also don't have to worry about the waiting for it to heat and dealing with the heating packets. If you're going to use a pot of water or a pot, you can use it to boil water. You can rehydrate things. You can put pouches in them to heat things. But if you can avoid having the issue of cooking material onto the side of your pans, whether it's nonstick or not, it's just so much easier to clean it if it's watered. Keep your canteens and hydration systems clean. So follow the manufacturer's cleaning instructions. Most of them you can go online and find the instructions for cleaning them. Never put drink mixtures in your canteens or hydration systems, especially the hydration systems, because you'll get that sugary sweetness in the tubes. They will tend to grow things, and it'll become unsanitary. Keep the container opening and mouthpiece clean at all times. Pictured here are a couple things: the water bag in the left bottom corner, some other types of bags. You have a CamelBak that you can store. One of the ones that I think is overlooked quite often are if you are on business travel or you happen to be out and about, these smart water containers are 1 liter containers. They weigh less than a Nalgene. They're cheaper than a Nalgene, and they actually fit with some of the water filtration systems. So I highly recommend, if you're looking for a very, very cheap alternative, the smart water containers work very well. And those are ones that you can take and mix in your, Gatorade or whatever you want to do for your electrolytes and not worry about cleaning it out. So if you're in the backcountry, you may have to use alternate water sources. Assume all the water you come in contact with is unsafe. So water filtration is your safest method to assure safe water. Use filters capable of removing dangers of bacteria and Giardia. You don't want to get into a situation, Giardia specifically, where it's going to cause you to dehydrate quite rapidly. So absolutely use water filters. The one pictured here is a Sawyer. There's a number of other filters that are available on the market that are good and light. Sawyers are one of the lightest that I've dealt with. You can also look at, Katadyn makes a MicroPure tablet. If you've ever had to use the iodine tablets, these don't have that flavor. There's a little bit of a trick to using them, so make sure you read the instructions if you are going to use a tablet. It's not something where you can drop it in and drink right away. You've got to wait half an hour to an hour or longer, depending on the quality of the water. But they achieve the same level of cleanliness or sterilization of the water that you would get from filtering. So personal hygiene is important. Keep yourself healthy. If not, you are not mission effective. You can't give your full attention to the mission. And keeping the hygiene and sanitation is important as you go forward, and keeping up with that so that you don't have to be taken out of the field. And planning and training keeps personnel healthy and focused on mission objectives. So at this point, I'll look to see if we have any questions. Okay. I'm getting the sign that we have no questions. Let me bring up the next presentation. Okay. This presentation is containing land survival slides. So if you are out in the woods and you get lost, main things you'll need for survival, you'll need to have food, water, shelter, and primarily a positive mental attitude. So for food, most healthy people can go 10 days, depending on the condition, if not longer. Some senior members can probably go longer. The ground team members should be carrying at least a few meals out with you when you go. A team lead should be making sure that you have sufficient food. If you're worried at all, absolutely bring some food with you. I usually carry 2 to 3 days worth of my own food with me, just in case we don't have easy access. I usually carry heavy calorie dense food, nuts, energy bars, nothing that I really have to make anything to make it work. So for water, you can go only a few days at most, depending on the conditions. You can have serious issues in 1 day if you don't have enough water. So your team leads should be providing you water or making sure you have opportunities to get water. You should be drinking water constantly. And if your team lead is doing your job, his or her job, they should be reminding you of that constantly to hydrate. And you should remind your fellow team members. So if it's in warmer climates, you're going to need more water. And if you're working, actually working will require more water than sitting idle. Also be aware of your conditions. So if you're in the south or you're somewhere where there's a lot of humidity, you will know that you're sweating because the sweat doesn't evaporate as well. Drink your water. If you are in Arizona, if you're in Colorado, someplace where the humidity is lower, your body is doing a good job at swamp cooling itself and you're evaporating the water, but you don't realize that you're sweating as much as you are. Drink water. You should be drinking all the time. As we discussed back in the health, if you're not basically peeing clear or pale yellow, you're not drinking enough. So if you're stuck in the field for a longer period of time, you may need to gather and purify water. We just discussed this. You can boil for 10 minutes. You can use the improvised or commercial filters, like I said, something like the Sawyer, or you can use the chemical tablets for water purification. This is one where I'll tell you what I usually do is I actually have pretty much gone to the tablets just because they are timely. I can fill up and keep moving without really taking a break. Filtering water for a group of people takes a long time. Other methods, if you really have to, you can do water transpiration bag. Basically, you're pulling the moisture out of as the plants heat. Moisture comes out, you collect it, and then it condenses and runs out, and you can collect that water and drink it. This is another diagram of that. You have a clear plastic bag around the vegetation, direct sunlight, you knot it up, you collect it, and the sloping ground will bring the water out and you can drink it. Solar still, clear plastic sheet over a small pit with a cup down in the bottom, rock in the middle. That way the water will condense on the outside of the plastic, run down to the rock, and then drip down. Making sure that you have green foliage that is either growing in the depression or you've collected and put in the depression, basically, to still it out. And then water filtration, you can do different methods. They've got one where you can do grass, sand, and charcoal. You can make your own ones. Really, if you use a commercial filter or boil it, those are really your two options. I wouldn't do the other ones. Now, I might use a hanging filtration if I have sand and I have really tepid water where it's got a lot of silt in it and a lot of mud in it. I might run it through if I can collect some sand and pour it through there just to get some of the particulate matter out of it if I don't have a filter and I'm using tablets. A filter should be able to, like the Kated in here, should easily be able to handle most of that quite easily. Any of these methods, whether it's the filter, the tablet, or one of these home improvised methods, practice it before you go out in the field. The water filters, you need to make sure you know how to backwash them with the water that you have before you go out in the field. You don't want to contaminate your water filter. If you haven't used the tablets before, use it off tap water first and make sure you know how to use them, clean the threads, etc. Shelter. Shelters really depend on what you have with you and how long you plan on being out there. So you can use materials that are readily available in the wilderness, or if you have a proper 24-hour bag, you should at least have a tarp, some cordage that you can make a shelter. Poncho shelters, they take a short amount of time, minimal equipment, assuming you don't need your poncho to stay dry. You can make a shelter out of it. Main thing with the poncho shelter is you're going to need about 3 meters of rope, stretch it between two trees, and you're going to need some stakes. You can make some stakes in the field if you need to. That's one of the ones you can forget at home. If you have a knife and a little bit of time and some sticks, you can make the stakes pretty easily and fabricate a shelter. Before selecting the trees, check the wind direction. You want to make sure that wherever your poncho or tarp is hanging, the wind won't be bringing in rain or cold wind that you don't want to have. So orient it so that your shelter blocks that out. Something very important with poncho shelters is tying off the hood. If you don't tie off the hood, you're going to get wet in the middle of the night. And you want to pull that drawstring tight and then fold it into thirds and then tie it off with the drawstring. It's really important to make sure that that is secured and water won't come down in it. You also don't want it depressing down so that it collects water and that causes water to work its way in. So if you plan to lean-to for more than one night and you expect rain, make sure you have a center support. So you don't want the shelter sagging in on you and causing water to drip in or cause your shelter to fail by collecting water. For additional protection, if you have a small gap running along the bottom of your tent or whatever you're using for shelter, you can put your rucksack, you can put brush, you can put anything you need to on that small opening to enable that wind not to penetrate into your shelter. Whether you're using a poncho shelter or you're using a tarp shelter, or if you're doing hammock hanging, anything where you have a line that's running into underneath your rain protection, you want to make sure that you have a drip stick. You can either tie if you know how to tie a stick into the line, you can put a stick into it so that when the water comes down, it hits the stick, and then the water tension will pull it and it will just drip off the stick. I find that using a little bit of paracord, just doing a lark's head, just put it around kind of as it is depicted here. We'll do the same thing. It's lightweight, it's easy to do, and you can use small amounts of line to do it. You can even take out the inside of a little bit of paracord and do your entire tent with it. Main thing is keep the water from coming down so it's not dripping in through the entire storm or whatever you're dealing with. So here's a poncho tent depicted. You can see the one in the upper right hand corner is is basically staked out and just has two sticks holding it up. The more common method is the support between the trees, and you can see a couple different ways of supporting the middle of the tent if you have to. Lean-to, very similar, it's just you leave one side open. So if you're at Camp Atterbury and it's warm outside, this is what I usually sleep in, is something where I've got essentially a lean-to. That way I can keep air and keep as cool as I can throughout the night. Another kind of shelter is an A-frame shelter. You can use it with the no pole option at the top. You basically run your cordage around a tree. You can do 2 half hitches, run it down to a stake at the far distance, and then you just hang your poncho or your tarp over it and then secure it along the length. The other methods here using poles usually take a long time to set up. So if you're going to do this, I would tend to lean towards the first option or the one pole A-frame. Anytime you're working with cordage, if you aren't used to doing lashings and you haven't practiced them, try to keep it simple. If you plan on doing something like this, I would highly recommend picking up a notebook and learning some basic lashes. That's going to be outside the scope of this course. Lean-to shelters, kind of the same idea. A lot of lashing work. These I would consider, if I was going to be there, a much longer time. Field expedience shelters. If you've ever actually built one of these, they aren't terribly field expedient to actually make them useful and hold out water. You'll have to build up layers and layers and layers of sticks and leaves and green material to make it useful, other than maybe the tree on the right. Again, use the tarp if you have it. It's the best way to do it. And then these are if you just have a tree down that you can get underneath it. Probably would avoid putting a fire underneath it, as depicted in the bottom upper left. Snow shelters. If you happen to be out when it's snowing, or you get a situation where you have to deal with it when it's cold, from experience, I will tell you the upper right hand is what I have typically done. I have slept in that condition down to -40 degrees, and it works just fine if you have the right gear. The snow blocks, you can build up a shelter snow blocks, but typically that takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy to do it. If you can do the dugout shelter in the bottom left, that works also well. In addition to something like a quinzhee, where you pile up the snow and then you dig a hole into it, and then you can build your shelter inside it. That's good if you have a lot of wind and it's extremely cold. You can stay a lot warmer that way. Keep in mind that takes a lot of energy, and you'll need to be consuming a lot of calories to be moving that much snow and doing the digging. The simple snow wall is by far the simplest to put up, and it works very effectively. Other snow shelters, you can build essentially an igloo with blocks up, or you can dig out. If you have a tree, you can kind of dig down towards the base of the tree, or if there's a natural depression, you can take advantage of that, as it's depicted in the bottom right. If you're in a very wet area, you don't want to be on the material on the ground between the insects and just being wet and making it so that you're not going to be able to continue. Getting off the ground and making a lash bed above the ground can work. Again, this is one of those ones where you need to practice it before you get out in the field and do it. You need to know how to do lashings. You need to know how to do it secure so that you don't get up there in the middle of the night, then fall and injure yourself. If you're in the desert, basically these are all variations of getting underground or getting a shelter above you. The two things you'll note is one, 2 layers of protection, one to get the solar absorption and then giving some layer of protection and then another layer. So in this case, you have the top poncho with the sand anchor around it. You have an airspace and then you have the liner on the next level. And the person's in a trench underneath. Desert shelters, same thing, just different version of it. In all these cases, one of the most important things that you need is a positive mental attitude. So if you're lost, positive mental attitude is one of the most important things you can have. You don't give up. Make sure that you have the will to survive. Do everything you need to do to keep your spirits up. I'm going to go over quickly on fire building. So fire is not typically a necessity to live unless you need the heat. You need to boil water or cook food, but it does keep you occupied if you're lost. So let me get through this. Oh, 7 steps. Decide if the fire is necessary. Do you really need to have it? Very rarely do you actually need to have a fire. Morale, water, typically, or heating yourself if it's in a cold environment would be the only ones that I do. And even in the cold environment, that's only if you don't have the proper gear. Choose a good fire location. You should be you should be away from anything that's combustible. If you have anything that's, pine needles or anything of that nature around you, make sure that's cleared from wherever you're going to do your fire. Arrange your firewood for burning. Touch that on the next slide. Ignite the tinder and then add fuel as necessary, and then extinguish when done. So a couple things that I recommend when you're starting a fire. So I use the matchsticks, pencils, and thumbs. So for the tinder, you want things that are matchstick size or smaller in terms of diameter. It doesn't matter how long they are, but it has to be very small because they need a large surface area and you need to be able to get heat into them. Think about it this way. If I have a piece of paper and I light a flame and put it underneath it, I can heat that. There's a lot of surface area. It absorbs the heat. It burns quickly. If I take a match and I hold it to a log, it's not going to burn because it absorbs the heat, but you can't get enough heat to actually get the combustion process working. So you need a lot of what I call matchsticks. Get anything that's matchstick size or smaller, collect a big bundle of it. And if you think you need this big of a bundle, you should be collecting that big of a bundle, if not 2 of those. Kindling should be things that are roughly pencil size. Okay, this will be the next step that you're going to go up to. And you're going to carry bundles of that. And then from there, get your fuel, which is bigger sticks. You can start moving into green wood if you prep it right. You can use, as I pictured here, or depicted here, some animal dung, fats, coal, shade, oil. So I have used oil before as a method to keep things going. But essentially what you want to do, small matchstick things first, work that up to once the flames are getting big enough and that's warm enough, start adding your pencils. And then once that's going and you've established that fire, then bring your fuel in. Alternative methods, magnifying glass. So depending on which magnifying glass you've got, or which compasses you've got. If you have one of the ones that has the larger magnifying glass, I can say that it is possible to start a fire with one of those. It takes time and it takes practice. If you plan on if you're saying I'm going to carry this magnifying glass as one of my fire starting methods and not carrying something else, or you're going to use this backup from a lighter, make sure that you practice it before you try it in the field. It's not quite as easy as it seems or it looks. And it does take practice to get a consistent fire started, and you need to know what kind of material that you have to collect to get it started. Here's some common fire arrangements. TP fire is probably typical of what most people will do. The other fires are good for larger events, or if you need to avoid wind in some cases. But TP fire is 9 out of 10 times what I'll use if I need a fire. If you are in a snow-covered area, like I said, when I mentioned taking the match and trying to light the log, that same thing, that pulling the energy out of the flame and making it difficult to light a fire. If you take and try to start a fire on frozen ground, the ground will absorb the heat and make it so that the combustion process doesn't work as well. So get it off the ground, give it some insulation. to burn. So I'll go over the fire triangle in the next phrase. That's probably the easiest way to do it. And basically they're saying break the triangle to stop the fire. Okay, so fire triangle. So you need three things for fire. You need heat, oxygen, and fuel. You take any one of those sides away and you will stop the fire. So if I put it on ice, when I try to have a fire on a frozen lake, which you can do, that will pull the heat away. It won't get the fire. If you don't have enough oxygen to a fire, if you make the kindling and everything too tight and it can't get oxygen into it, it won't burn. And then if you don't have fuel, it won't burn either. There's also a chemical reaction that kind of ties it. That's how they do the fire pyramid. And there are certain chemical reactions that will increase the fire. So main thing is, if you want to put out a fire, you need to remove one of these. So you can put water on it. Putting water removes heat and oxygen. It doesn't remove the fuel. You can put sand on it. That will help remove the oxygen. Different ways of putting it out. So if you ever have to use a fire extinguisher, there's class A, B, C's, and D's. Class A is for common combustibles, paper. B is for flammable liquids and gases, and class C is for electrical fires, and D is for flammable metals. If you ever have to use a fire extinguisher, use the PASS acronym. You'll pull the pin, you'll aim the fire extinguisher, you'll squeeze it, and you'll sweep at the base of the fire. So if you're outdoors, you want to keep people away from and upwind of when you're ready to move, use water if available. Don't use your purified water. If you can go get a bucket of water out of a creek or some other dirty water source, you can use that. And then you want to splash, spray, or sprinkle water on the fire. Don't pour it all at once. So slowly work it over time. Pour some water on it, cool it off, work for the hot spots, poke it, take a prod, move the fire, the fuel around, find where things are still hot, and hit those places specifically with the water. Break up until you don't have any fire left. You should be able to go and take your hand when you're done and hold it over the fire, and there'll be no heat. And if you have a brush fire going on, it should only be attempted if it's very, very small. Brush fires will go out of control very, very quickly. Call authorities if you need to. So, all that said, actions when lost. There are two acronyms. You get to choose one that you'll have to memorize. One is survival. So for survival, you size up your situation. You know, what is the situation I'm in, and figure out what assets you have and how you can better your situation. Undue haste makes waste. You need to slow down and not rush or do anything stupid. Try to remember where you are. Sometimes that initial panic sets in and you don't always think through everything. Hey, I came down this path. I know there's something over here. Sometimes if you just take that moment to pause and think, you'll remember it. Vanquish any fear or panic. Fear or panic does not help you in any way, shape. So get that out of your mind. Do what you can to improve your situation. Make it so that each thing you do makes your situation better, gets you towards safety again. Value living. Keep up your hope. Keep up that positive mental attitude. Act like the natives. If you see animals around and they're eating certain things, and you've been out there for a while and you need to eat, see what the natives are eating. See where they bed down for shelter. See if you can learn anything from that. Learn basic skills and use them. So this is the one I keep harping on, is no matter what skill that, if it's the water purification, if it's I'm going to learn how to do cat holes, if I'm going to do, I want to be able to set up a field expedient shelter. Learn the basic skills and use them often. These are all perishable skills. So the other acronym that you can use when you're going through your op quals is you can use STOP. It might be easier to remember because there's only 4 letters. So stay where you are. So don't, stay where you are. Make sure that you're safe. Take your time, think before acting rashly, observe your surroundings, see what other, this gets back to act like the natives, find out where you can be safe, and then plan for the worst. So improve your situation, but make sure that you plan for the worst. In all cases, positive mental attitude is critical. Last one I'm going to cover is attraction techniques. So if you are out and this is part of a ground team and you are trying to find somebody, you want to, sound is one of the attraction techniques you can do. So you can shout the victim's name if it's been released. So this is one where you need to talk to your ground team lead, and if somebody is lost and you're searching for somebody that's in the woods, you can either say, hey, and just, try to get their attention. If you know their names, by all means use it. You can use the honking of vehicle horns. So if you're in an area, you can hammer on the horns and get their attention, or you can use a public address system. If you are using sound, it's important to take a break when you're using the sound. So if I'm going to go out and I'm going to, we're going to make a lot of noise, we're going to shout, or let's say I'm going to have everybody in the team blow their whistles. We will blow it, we will make a lot of noise, and then we will go quiet and we will listen and see if you can hear a response. If it's nighttime, you can absolutely use light. Fires, flashlights, headlights. You can find the victim by helping them find you. So maybe if they see the light in the distance, they will come to you, and you can facilitate the rescue that way. You can also look in if they have a light and see it in the distance. So I think that covers the material for this evening. Do we have any questions? Okay. With that, thank you for joining the fifth night, and hopefully you will join us next week. Thanks.